Hey Steelers Nation, it's Joe Rockey coming back at you from the Pittsburgh Steelers Syndicate. In this episode, we are going to be discussing hidden gems on the Steelers roster that all are playing the same position. But before I dive into this episode proper, please, if any of you members of Steelers Nation has any direct contact with an individual person at any of the players' charities or causes, please give me that contact person and information by clicking this button up here and filling out the contact form. I greatly would appreciate it because there'd be so much value talking to the players, foundations, and causes so we can give really good information about what it is that they do. And potentially, you guys might want to be involved with it too. But giving illumination to the causes, I think, will only help and benefit everyone involved. But now with that being said, I mentioned in yesterday's episode that Khan has brought so much depth to this team that it is just crazy good. And I'm going to just focus upon one position in today's episode because there are so many hidden gems that could make this team and make valuable impact on this team. And there's more players than we have roster spots, quite frankly. And I am talking about the wide receiver position. So obviously we know the big starters. Deontay is getting the starting nod. George Pickens is a starting nod. Those two basically will not come off the field unless we're in a goal line set. And then we have a cluster of guys that, because of special teams needs and because of just flat out wide receiver ability, have a big hunt of making this roster. Obviously, we traded for Allen Robinson. We have Calvin Austin, who we drafted last year. One of the big unknowns that Steelers Nation, I think, is going to get greatly familiarized with is Anthony Miller. We did re-sign Miles Boykin a little bit back before the draft. And then we still have the gunner Olszewski, who cost us the game against New England. So already in that description, you can see I have a little bit of bias about who's going to be where and who should be doing what. So historically, the Steelers keep 5 to 6 receivers on their 53-man roster. And I have just given you 7 to 8 legitimate names that could make this team and be legitimate players. So I wanted to go through each of them and give context for the argument for why I think that this guy is really going to illuminate this team and really make people stand out. This is not going to be about the top two, George Pickens and Deontay. They're amazing. We all know that. I want to dive into the deeper catches here. So obviously Calvin Austin III, giant speedster out of Memphis, drafted in the 4th round in last year's draft. He doesn't get to get on the field because he gets put on the IR during August, and then therefore we just don't get to see him during the duration of the season. But what Calvin Austin brings to the table, aside from immaculate speed, is the ability to be an above-average returner. And in this league, I really do believe being both a punt and a kick returner are so overrated. Almost every kickoff, whenever it's a meaningful situation, is put out of the back of the end zone. And the punters are basically creating fair catches every single time that they can. It's essentially the league standard. So when we talk about keeping a position solely for punt return skills, I think it's incredibly overrated and not something that should have that high of stats. That being said, it is still a need that needs to be fulfilled just for obvious reasons. You don't have someone back to catch the punt who's able to do it, you're going to lose games to New England when they fumble. It's a problem. Not good. So when I look at having receivers, particularly the 3rd, 4th, and 5th ones on the depth chart, they have to be able to contribute on special teams. That is Austin's pathway to contribute on punt 2 and kickoff 2. If he can increase his tackling ability, he has the speed to be one of the absolute best gunners in the NFL, and that's on both kickoffs and punt coverage. So you're covering 4 of the major special teams, and who knows, they might even be able to develop him to come off the edge to block a field goal. And now you got 5 out of the 6 because he's never going to be on field goal protection. So Calvin Austin is a guy that all of Steeler Nation wants to see just give the ball in his hands. And as we think back to the Switzers to the Ray McLeods, and even last year with Olszewski, giving the ball to the punt returner and having them try to do something with it and it not working at all. I mean, it's been 5 years of me screaming at my TV of why are you giving him the ball? Why is he even on the field? Calvin Austin takes that all away. Calvin Austin actually is electric. He can juke a move. And because he's so tiny, he's really actually harder to tackle. Because you get these bigger middle linebackers who are just towering over him. It's hard to catch the little fast guy. He's a blur out there. And I am very excited for Calvin Austin. I'm really hoping that he just legitimately takes not just the responsibility of the two returners, but I hope that he becomes in the mix as one of the third receivers on this team. And third receiver on this team, I believe, is going to have a very limited target share compared to years past. And that's for two main reasons. The first is Washington is amazing, and he warrants being on the field, and you're not taking Freiermuth off the field. So therefore, just the flat-out amount of snaps that your third receiver is going to be on the field will be reduced. And before we even start about talking about the talent of the other players, just being on the field less means you're going to get less balls strung your way. So the amount of talent is there, and it just might be hidden because of how loaded this offense is. Khan has done such a great job at building this team. Like it's just crazy. So the next one I do want to roll to was the trade for Allen Robinson. Robinson, the more and more I think about this from a pure skill and tactical standpoint, is in trouble. He's in trouble for the simple fact that he hasn't really been elite for 2 years. His time in LA was horrendous. They expected him to step up and be a legitimate number 2 like he was in Chicago earlier in his career, and it did not happen. Now, there was a lot of train wrecks going on with the Rams last year, but Allen Robinson could have helped himself and just didn't. And the obvious argument for why you think he didn't would be the injury health and coming back. But the one thing that has to be noted, LA is what? It's a mega entertainment capital. It's a city that loves drama. Go do some searches for Allen Robinson. Despite the fact that team was in a train wreck, his career might have been on the skids and out. We didn't see it from him. So could this be, to make a Penn's reference here, bringing in a Billy Guerin type to just bring in some stability into a room that we haven't had in a while? Maybe. Will Allen Robinson be capable of playing special teams, being on the punt coverage to kickoff coverage? Maybe. You know, it's hard to ask that out of a 29-year-old who hasn't really ever done it before, at least on the professional level. But it doesn't mean it's not possible. So when we look at this in totality, do I think that Allen Robinson is legitimately going to come back and be pushing either of the top 2 receivers for top 2 playing time? No. Hard no. Do I think that he's going to be pushing Darnell? Why we should be not playing Darnell Washington because we need to keep Allen Robinson on the field? Again, no. Also, again, to note, to push for why I believe Darnell Washington's going to get so many snaps. The team did much better when they were running the ball last year, and that guy is an instant run blocking upgrade. And again, I don't think there's a scenario where you take Freiermuth off the field ever. So we get into this and go, maybe the back-end receivers can be a luxury pick and help us be able to be a solid locker room stable. And Allen Robinson is one of the guys who certainly makes an argument for that case. The other guy that does that is the one that the Steelers brought in last year, essentially for that purpose, which is Miles Boykin, coming in from Baltimore and obviously being with us last year. Boykin basically was a special teams guy. His 6'4" height, it's like they didn't even know he had it until we got into the second half of the year. And they started getting more playing time and a couple of fades thrown his way. But he never really liked the world on fire under any real capacity. But what Boykin did was he's a solid special teamer, big size, And, he was a stable special teams guy. With that being said, do I think that he's going to light the world on fire and be our end-all be-all? I mean, he's got a little bit of pedigree. I mean, he was good at Notre Dame. He was a third-round pick after all. And like many people, he escaped the hell that is with Lamar Jackson. Good on him for that. And I look at this overall and say, I don't want to kick Boykin out the door. I think that there's a lot of talent there. Obviously, he tested the free agent market. It didn't go anywhere. Signed with the Steelers a couple of weeks before the draft. So there's not a lot of other teams clamoring for that. And when you see a situation like that, it can be a spot where either A, I'm accepting my role as a special teams guy, or B, I see a pathway to get onto the field. And I think it's more likely to be the first one, where he's accepting his terms, his role as being a special teams player, as being someone that can be very good at it. And he has been. So when we look at why would you consider keeping Boykin on the roster, the answer then comes back to being, if he's down there doing the kickoff and punt coverage, it allows one of your secondary people not to have to do that. So does it allow us to bring in a guy like Witherspoon to make the roster, who with his injury risk, do we want him running down and making all these tackles? Or can we keep Boykin there on the team to do it? And again, with the lesser need of the third receiver, it's even smaller for the fourth receiver. And I've already kind of tipped my hat that one of those two should be Calvin Johnson. The other one that I think that should get a lot of consideration, that Steelers Nation really has not had a chance to really absorb and see, is Anthony Miller. Give a little background about Anthony Miller. Also, like Calvin Austin, went to Memphis. Not as short as Austin, but he is 5'11". Major difference, he was drafted in the second round at 51 overall. Reason I point that out is George Pickens was drafted at 52 overall. That's the ballpark of caliber receiver that's coming off the board here. And Miller has a lot of talent in the ability to get out of his breaks, out of his cuts. The problem with Miller has been the health. There's just no way around it. And I think that if you have a combination out there on the field of going four wide, of Pickens, Miller, Austin, and Johnson, sure, three of them are short, which is fine, but they all are twitchy and speed. And that is a look that whenever you're preparing for the Steelers is something that's going to have to make you consider. Because we already know that the Steelers are going to be able to go big and power and run. Their tight end room is stacked. That's going to happen. Najee is a good power back. He's a little bit more balanced than power, I guess, but he's still very good at delivering the contact. And the Steelers have kind of shown that they're okay winning games by 3 points in the fourth quarter with a field goal. Tomlin's done that most of his career, and he's been okay with that. That was part of the Ben way. So if you say we have the ability to go big, powerful, and run it down your face, and then we also are having to say technical speed guys, we have them too, it's a very, very hard roster to prepare for. Because these guys might not always get a hat every week if they make their 53. Doesn't mean they're always going to get dressed. Like, I can see that being the case with a Miller of the world, where he's on the 53. If he's not being your special teams extraordinaire, which he probably wouldn't, have him here, just don't give him a hat. Because 8 people don't get a hat every week. That would make sense that he's unfortunately one of those categories. And when I look at this potential of this group, there's so much talent there. And I haven't even talked to some of the guys who made the team last year. Particularly Olszewski. Olszewski, again, I'm not big on Olszewski. I wasn't big on Switzer. I wasn't big on Ray Ray. He gives you the ability to catch a punt, unless he's playing New England. And there's not a whole lot after the return that is worth the roster spot over Anthony Miller in my mind. Yes, He did have a great return the year before he came here, return average that be. But in an era when the amount of returnable punts and kicks is getting less and less and less, I would rather have the better player in the regular downs, knowing that injuries are eventually going to be happening, and it's week 9. I don't want Olszewski to be on the field. That's just the way that I'm thinking. You know, he's got a great name. Everyone loves yelling Gunner. Gunner this, Gunner that. Yeah. But give me Anthony Miller, Austin, Boykin, and maybe even Robinson, and I think that you're a much better team, provided that Austin can return the punts, than you are with keeping Gunner on it. And you're obviously better on the offensive side. And in the special teams world, I know that the Steelers give a lot of value to their core special teams guys, as they should. But given the amount of depth in virtually every other position, I don't think that wasting a spot on the return man is worth it. So this is a long story short to say, Khan has been doing an amazing job. I remember back in time when we only had 3 viable receivers. And that was it. That was stretching it. And now we have legitimately 6, maybe 7. And this is a great situation. This is when you're saying, let's build a nest for a young quarterback. Khan did it. I mean, you look at this. Great running back. And I get that people are down on Najee because he didn't have a great first half of the year. He was hurt. Najee's going to have a great comeback year. Amazing tight end room. And a deep with above average talent across the board, some of them potentially being elite wide receivers. Well, there really isn't going to be any excuse for this offense and for Kenny Pickett's development. And unfortunately, I have had to come to accept this, that even though I didn't want Canada to come back, and I have lots of reasons why, I've outlined them before, at the end of this year, if Kenny Pickett isn't successful, Canada can't be blamed. It has to be Kenny's ride or die year. Like, at the end, I know it's hard. It's your second year. You gave him the system to stay with. That means you're all in with both of them as a pair now. And I want the Steelers to win. I want the Steelers to win so badly. I fear the glass ceiling that Matt Canada is. That being said, everyone's capable of growth. Everyone's capable of surprises. And every once in a while, you get someone that bucks a decade's worth of trends. Let's hope that this year Canada is able to do that, because I do believe that Kenny Pickett is in the best spot that any young quarterback could possibly be in. And by the way, I'd even mention the fact that the defense is keeping the other team's score down every single week. It's going to be a great year, Steelers. I'm so excited for this. I'm excited to see what the actual schedule looks like coming out tonight. It's going to be awesome. That will be obviously tomorrow's episode. I did the breakdown earlier in the week of who we're playing, but now that we're going to know the when, it obviously adds a lot more finality to it. I love seeing the times of the games, and that's what tomorrow's episode is going to be. So here we go, Steelers. Here we go.